We're all ready to go, I guess. Okay. Join palms, bow. The four great vows. I vow to deliver innumerable sentient beings. I vow to cut off endless vexation. I vow to master limitless approaches to Dharma. I vow to attain supreme Buddhahood. Okay, hello to you all. We are always talking about mind work, and I don't want you to get the impression that I'm not devotional. I'm quite devotional in what I do. I also spontaneously have recitation arising in my mind at any given time, and especially if there's times when my mind becomes stressed, I will recitate, but I will also do that to transfer merit to people, especially when I think of them. And if I think of somebody that's there in harm's way or something, I will remember that and provide as much comfort as I can by doing that, and doing recitation for them, and also burning incense in the morning and in the evening, essentially blessing everybody and sending out protection into all quarters. I believe that this is important so that we don't simply see this as some form of a mental exercise that is one that is devoid of faith. The faith is very, very important in our practice. And as we saw, this was emphasized by Faith in Mind, the Chan poem that was pointing directly to mind and saying, this is where you should put your faith. And putting our faith in with the mind. And the Chinese have a way of saying it, which is heart mind. How do you say that in Chinese? I'll refer to my resident Chinese, Harry. Heart mind. It's like Sheng Min or something.
I think it's just Shin. It's
Shin?
just yeah. I mean, it can be taken either way.
Yeah, and so Shin is this idea of the heart. And Shifu, I remember, used to always ask people, where is your heart? And it's interesting because he was not simply saying, where is your mind? But he was saying, where is your heart? And this again is a very interesting aspect of Buddhism, of that moves aside is and is not, and moves aside any kind of a discussion, it is or is not, to just simply come into the mind and the domain of the mind by simply severing all of these notions. It does not make the notions disappear. It does not make consciousness disappear. But what it does is it brings us to this point of clarity, that what is looking at, what is listening at this moment and looking on the screen or whatever is just mine. We cannot paint that any image or put even a label on it. We saw that from the early passages between the patriarch and the disciple, where one was saying, you know, I'm very angry all the time. And the master says, bring me your anger. Let me see it. And he says, well, I can't bring it to you. I can't show you it. I'm not angry right now. And he said, if it was your true nature, it would be with you always. But since it is not here, it's not truly your true nature. And it's a way of looking at it from a point of view of that, which became very, very popular, which is this pointing to the negative, what it is not. And so let's see, is Robert here? I can see him. Oh, there he is. And what did I tell you about how would you spot phenomena?
Well,
don't panic. You can hear
It's anything just move, anything move.
anything that moves is phenomena. And that is why they talk about, thank you, Robert, it's a stillness. Because the stillness of mind doesn't mean a cold stone, in a pool of water. It is the stillness that comes, and we could call it emptiness. So the idea of emptiness, where it is not the emptiness of something, but the emptiness of phenomena, to the extent that all phenomena shares a common ground of dependent origination. And if all phenomena shares a common ground, there's only one place it could be found if it's dependently originating, and that's where? Nowhere, right? What? Where is this found? In mind. In mind. Come on. Is this microphone working? Okay. So it's just in mind. Everything that appears is a product of mind. And this was the great epiphany during this time period. But it went further because of the fact it wasn't something that it just negates everything to the extent of a nihilistic approach. And it walked this very, very narrow line. And it had to, in terms of doctrinally, to avoid falling on the side that everything is returns to a Godhead. And then that would be monistic. But it isn't that way. And they were careful because they go, we got to watch this. We can't say that because people will come back and go, aha, it's monistic, which is what some modern day scholars are trying to say about the Tathagata Garbha sutras being monistic, is because they don't understand it. They can only look at it scholastically, and they cannot see it via the perception of mind itself. And via perception of the mind itself, they would not make such a specious argument. But it sounds very scholarly to make an argument like that. And it's very difficult to step outside the argument grounds to do that. I always say that, if it wasn't Mohenyon that was debating the Tibetan, then, if I went there, I probably wouldn't make a very good impression, because as soon as they started saying everything, I would say, you're right. And that would be the end of the debate. And because where are they going to take that to? I mean, what do you mean? I'm right. We won. Yeah, you, whatever, you win. So what did you win? No. And so that silence, that is why Vilamakritti's silence spoke volumes in there. But it also was a reason why Sariputra's ignorant silence also spoke volumes of misunderstanding. And so all of this, what I'm trying to do is bring forth and recreate the environment of the dawning of this classical period of Chan. And we have to see that during this classical period, there is a tremendous infusion of sutras. I just saw a movie, Esther. If you can remember the name of the person, are you there somewhere? That the name of the person from the movie, it was a monk that went to India, and he braved passing through the border because it was under penalty of death that you could not leave the country and China at that time. And he brought back like 574 sutras. And see, imagine that you're there and you're working off of the Lankavatara Sutra, maybe the Mahaprajna Paramita Sutra, and maybe a couple others. And then all of a sudden there's this amazing infusion of information. And again, this is very interesting because you have to see it in the context of how it is. It is like when you look up in the sky and you see the light and you see the stars, you realize that that light was emanating so many light years before, and it's just now arriving here to illuminate here. And that was the way it was when all of these sutras were now in India. There was a beginning of a waning of Buddhism, and by onslaught from the west of India coming into the country. And all of these treasures are moving to the east into China. And these were all things that had been written, some of them several hundred years before, but just coming out in that moment. And you see the Chinese taking it and going, wow, this is good. It was like if you would listen to classical music and you listen to something, the Brandenburg concertos, and you just go, oh, those were written like 200-300 years ago. That's old music, that's old. No, if you sat down and listened to it, it's wonderful. It's wonderful music. It didn't matter when it was written, it's good. And this was the appetite of the Chinese at that time towards sutras. They were gobbling them up as much as they could. Now, they didn't have an internet, so it wasn't instantly projected all over the country. And you have to understand how things progressed and moved, and how learning and examination and doctrinal studies of Buddhism moved along with the sutras that were coming out. But they were having an immediate effect when somebody read them. And it was the feeling that I had when I moved out of the Chan Sutras, the Shurangama Sutra, the Prajnaparamita Sutra, the Diamond Sutra, the Lotus Sutra, all these sutras that we lay claim to, and then start reading the Tathagata Garbha Sutras, and Queen Shirmala's Lion's Roar Sutra, the Uttara Tantra Sutra, the Vimakriti Sutra, all of these sutras, they're so incredibly deep. And I was looking at it and realized how little I knew about Buddhism. I cannot say I've read 574 sutras. I mean, this was the incredible wealth that was pouring into China, and maybe some of it went one way, some of it went another way. They had the foresight enough in the Dongham caves to preserve as much of it as they could, which was very, very incredible, to preserve it for us. All of those people, they could see into the future and say, we need to preserve this because this is good. It's like having a Tchaikovsky's a symphony of his and preserving it for the next generation. How sad it would be if we didn't have this classical music that was there. And it doesn't matter what kind of music it is, it could be whatever, but the music that we want to preserve. And this music was Chan music. It was very incredible, and it was pouring in to China during this classical period. And so there was quite a bit of shuffling in terms of how things were seen and even from the viewpoint from Theravadan. And there was a shift where in Theravadan they said if there was 5 sins that if you committed one, you could never become a Buddha. And there was this shift that was brought about that said, if you killed somebody or if you did this, it would be a long time before you could satisfy that karma, but everyone has a Buddha nature. And that was important. It was important because there, at that point, presents, and in China and doctrinally in China, the idea of salvation for everyone. Even if you were a bad sinner, you still could have salvation. Now, it's very interesting because the idea of salvation is probably one of the highest selling points of any religion. That if you go to the spirit in the sky, and so, but here there was something that was different, and that wasn't that we are God's creation, but that there is no individual soul creation, no transmigration of souls. There is just simply mind. And when we see things in this way, we see it so clearly because it begins to fit. All the pieces begin to fit in. This is what is difficult to understand, but it what makes Buddhism attractive to me. Not necessarily religion per se, because I historically was one that strongly questioned religions of all types, and including Buddhism. But I found that fundamentally the Buddhism stood up to the test of looking at it and saying, no, so simple. You plant a melon seed and you get a melon. How good of a melon would depend on how you cultivate it. But that's causes and conditions. It's pretty simple stuff. And I think that was probably the biggest selling point the first time I heard Master Sheng lecture. It's so simple, so clear. I only wish I could lecture with his compassion and clarity. I have to use all these highfalutin words and things, but this is a different crowd that I'm speaking to today. What I'm hoping is that you can kind of get the feeling for the spirit of Chan that was happening during this time period. It was an incredible time period where they'd go, have you read this or have you read that or whatever? And it's something very interesting in terms of looking at it and studying it and then seeing my students studying it. And looking at it, and each one has their own way to study and their own path in terms of how they're going to do it. But it is the understanding that we preserve the aspect of Chan. We preserve this idea of ekayana, this mind. And that's what's important. And that's what was being nailed down early. And these compilations that appeared, hold on a second. Wrong one. Lenji Shizuji, Record of the Masters of the Disciples of the Lankavatara, was one of them. And this was from the time period of 683 to 750, right in the middle of the classical time period, and it's kind of making a record of all of these masters and disciples. And so it's laying this all out so that we can take a look at it and say, that this is what was going on. And it's really a thumbnail sketch that we start from and then we work out. And now we have the ability, because of modern technology, to see all of the parallels from different schools and the different teachers and disciples to see what they were doing. But all through it, they still maintain this integrity of Buddhism. I would say integrity of Chinese Buddhism, where the Chinese put their slant on Buddhism, and all cultures do that. All you have to do is look at a statue of Jesus Christ, a crucifix from Germany, and what would you see? Is Michael here? No, he would have blonde hair and blue eyes and light skin. If you saw one from the Dominican Republic, he would have curly hair and dark skin, which, by the way, is what the National Geographic seemed to think what Jesus would have looked like. They just kind of retouched some old photographs of him to recreate that. But in any case, there's always a flavor from the indigenous community when there's an introduction of something from another culture, and that was what was happening in China. But what was I really strongly believe, because based on these sutras, it remained true to form to Buddhism itself. It did not cut it off. And this is important. There was a story once where Master Sheng had was going to a university, I believe in Tokyo, and there was a Theravadan monk that he would pass all the time. Master Sheng had his robes, and the Theravadan monk would pass by with his saffron robes. And Shifu, he would always bow to him, and the monk would just walk on by. And it began to bother Master Sheng that this monk was so dismissive of him. So once when he did that and he gave respect to the monk just ignored him completely, and he finally caught up with him and said, "Let's sit down." And he said to him, "You, every time I see you every day, and I bow to you, but yet you just ignore me. Why do you, are you so discourteous?" And so the Theravadan monk said, "Well, because you're not a real monk." And he said, "What do you mean? You people, you Chinese people, you know, you don't really have, it's not really Buddhism. You're not real." And Shifu said, "Well, do you practice the 5 precepts? Yes. Do you practice the Vinaya? Yes. The Eightfold Path? Yes." And he went through a whole list of stuff. And so the Theravadan monk was saying, "Of course we do." And Shifu said, "So do we. Now tell me, is that not fundamental Buddhism?" And the monk had to think, and then from then on he was acknowledged Shifu, because he realized there was not that difference, even though there's a difference doctrinally in some ways. There had become such a schism between Theravadan and Mahayana that Theravadan was just poo-pooing everything, and then dealing with it and saying that this is what the Buddha taught. I think you've seen books like that where it says what the Buddha taught. Do you know why it is named what the Buddha taught? Anybody? Nobody. Boy, you guys are going to fail your scholar exams. Nobody knows why the title of the book is What the Buddha Taught. It's a Theravadan book. Because it's delineating that anything that's not in this book is not what the Buddha taught. So they always raise the issue. Another term that you should be familiar with is Buddhavacana. And the term Buddhavacana means what the Buddha taught, or it can be traced directly back to the Buddha. And it's used quite a bit to separate out and say, well, this isn't really the Buddha's words. This was made up, or this Mahayana stuff is all made up. But using that kind of an argument can also undercut all of your own studies if you're a Theravadan, because how would we know exactly what the Buddha taught and what exact words he was using at that time? And so it's difficult to try to make those kinds of arguments and then just stop and say anything that's Mahayana is not what the Buddha taught. It is, from what I can see in what I would say at this point in my life, where I would be a serious examiner and studier of Buddhism, that I think that's, to say the least, is an overstatement. And it could undercut everything in Buddhism. But the point that was most important here is that Chan Buddhism didn't eviscerate Theravadan practice. It modified it in certain ways, but preserved Buddhism in there. And Chan Buddhism did not put so much of a Chinese flavor into it, the fancy scholars call it sinification, that it totally changed the flavor of it to something that doesn't approach being Buddhist practice. The same argument can be made from the transition from Chinese Buddhism to Japanese and Japanese Zen, and say, oh, well, Japanese aren't really Buddhist. Well, they do that in their cultural flavor, and we may have differences as to some parts of the practice, but fundamentally it's the same. Likewise, as the Tibetan practice that didn't take off, I mean, just barely started in the 8th century, just barely was getting going by that point, and then really got going strong. But their form of Buddhism is one based also culturally on how they do things, and it's interesting, you know, how, because that is a lifelong study of its own in terms of Tibetan Buddhism and the different schools that are there. I'm probably more familiar with the Dochen school in terms of that, because it has the flavor of Chan. But you see, all of these things were happening at this one moment where this new spur was heading towards Tibet, and Tibetans were looking at it, and they were kind of like going, well, you know what, we're just going to tap into the Indic sources that from India and use those, you know, although there was still some reliance on some Chinese sources, but they went their own way, but it's still Mahayana. So this is a very, very exciting time in the history of Buddhism, because it was at a point where this is no longer an Indian phenomena, but it's now becoming a global phenomena. And that it's something that indigenous people could accept because of the fact that it did have this aspect of redemption or of salvation to a certain extent, not necessarily in the salvation of a soul, but the fact that there was no soul there, that one inherently had Buddha nature. And that was what was important, was that we all have it, even the worst of it, us have it. And so this is really something that's important for us to see in our practice, so that when we see people, we do not see them as good or bad, we see them in a way that we see the Buddha mind at work. And what's confusing to us is because we say, how can this person have a Buddha mind and be such a foul person or a greedy person or a hateful person or whatever, but because of the causes and conditions. It's not easy for us to put that down. It's not easy for us to understand that, you know, and sometimes I have people that are talking about, oh, this person from this group or whatever, but we have to see that things as they are and be patient with people. This is very, very important for us to maintain this great patience, because this great patience will lead to a very good compassion, this what I call unbridled compassion, which is not limited to people that you think you like or they're nice to you, but to everyone. It's not easy to practice that, but if you begin to practice it, things will change very rapidly in how you see the world, and also that the mind environment around you will change simply because of the changes that you make in yourself and in your environment. You're not trying to convert people. That's not how we work, you know. And so if you want to give somebody a pamphlet, you can, but I mean, no, our way is not so aggressive. Maybe we should do that, you know, because that seems to be a good selling point, you know, to give something to somebody from way off. And but that's not really our way of doing things. It's kind of interesting. But in any case, I'm kind of getting off, but what I wanted to do is give you a feeling for the Buddhist community at that time. A lot of things were happening. Now, understand that this is all happening in the high-level monastics and scholars at that time. To the indigenous people, they were sold, I should say sold, they were introduced to a pared down versions of this. But in any case, it was something that was appealed to them because of this aspect of this salvation, or you could say self-nature worth, that they were worth something, and everyone was worth something right off the bat, and that we possess this. And so this was a very strong selling point in terms of doing this. I was reading recently a scholar, and the scholar was talking about how that when we look back in the distant mirror, that we're always looking at what the scholars were talking about and what were the high-level monastics talking about, but we really don't see or study what the common people were being introduced to in Buddhism. And it always interests me when there is a historian or a Buddhist scholar that talks about those things, you know, and talks about this aspect of meditation or devotional side of the practice. And I think you would see, even in this day and age, that there's more devotional Buddhists than there are people that are penetrating at the level that you're penetrating. This was Shifu's goal, and I'll try to find. I just recently read a quote from him about this, and I'll try to find it and read it to you. So this lecture is a little bit of a potpourri, mixing modern day and also that classical period. But he was talking about that the fate of Chan Buddhism, and he specifically set up a system of renewing the lineage, the Chan lineage, and tying it upwards so that could be connected to the ancients, but brought forward, not necessarily by establishing patriarchs, but the Chan lineage that is there, so that people would have a feeling of belonging and a sense of belonging and a sense that there is something there. So he wrote that, you know, we don't have such complicated systems of practice. For instance, the Theravadins, they have their ways of practicing different jhanas and different kinds of means of concentration. How many of you have practiced any Theravadin practice? Raise your hand. Okay, I'm taking pictures. All right, but in any case, there is a when you practice. Sue, you have, haven't you? Okay, I don't think I'm not looking at you. All right, but there's so many methods of concentration that you use, and then you're supposed to use that to get samatha, and then get some vipassana. And he said that there's, you know, wonderful systems that they have. The Tibetans have this Vajrayana systems. How many of you practiced any Tibetan Nisong practice? Nobody? You, Sue? Okay. All right. Christian? It's okay. You can admit you're a Christian. All right. But anyway, he was talking about that. And he said that the people today, and he was talking about those from Taiwan and China, they get attracted to those. And they get attracted to them because they see, oh, this is a system, you know, and I can work my way up the ladder. And it's funny because even the Japanese with their Zen, they have passing the goans, which some of you know, kind of like my feeling about passing goans. So the thing is that but the Chan, we don't have the system like the Theravada has a system. We don't have the system of the very complex system of the Tibetans, but we have it all. Everything that they have in the Theravada, everything that the Tibetans have, is all incorporated into Chan. Everything is there. The only thing is that we forgot how to study. We forgot how to look deeply and into our own roots. That's why several years ago I was embarked on giving lectures and retreats on the roots of Chan, just simply to educate people as to what you're doing. It's like, you know, you don't know, you know, who you are. And it's important to know who you are. And when you know who you are, and you know what you're practicing, where it came from, then you realize how incredibly rich Chan is, because it took its own indigenous studies and mixed them with Buddhism without diluting Buddhism, but enhancing it. And it loved this idea of Shin, of the heart. And that was very attractive to Chinese. When we were looking at it, the Chinese had the Confucianism, which was very similar, looking for the perfect man or perfect person, and the Taoists who were looking for immortality. But in Buddhism, it laid out those things for us and said, there right now, it is not something you have to reach for. Reaching for it is actually reaching away from it. It is just in this moment, just now. And when we read the sutras, irregardless of what sutra it is, that's all they're saying. Read any sutra, read any complicated sutra, Tathagata Garbha Sutra, or the Mahaprajnaparamita Sutra, any sutra, and you'll see everything essentially comes back to mind and the nature of mind. And that's what we're doing with all of this. This is very, very important for us to understand how to practice and why we practice and why we should find out what was going on. It's not just simply, I would say California Hollywoody practice, where somebody gets a comforter and sets it out by their pool, and then lights up some incense and puts a little flower in a bowl and sits out there getting a tan and meditating at the same time. Probably more interested in the tan than the meditation. And maybe I'm kind of over exaggerating that. There's some people don't have a pool. But in any case, it is not in this way. This is new agey, what I call new agey meditation. And I'm more a classical Chan practitioner, and looking at things as they should. But Shifu was that way. So Shifu, going back to what he was saying in this article, he was saying the people, they don't understand how deep Chan is, how precious it is in the way in which it is presented is more towards meditation. But even Shifu said, you cannot become enlightened sitting on a cushion. Even though you would go to the retreat, people went to the retreat for the wrong reason. They were just trying to see how long they could park their bottom on a cushion and endure the pain in their legs, and hoping that they would pass out or the bell would ring to give them respite. But it isn't in this way. We go to retreat not just to practice. And then Shifu used to say, are you coming to the retreat to practice your legs or the Dharma? That's his words. I don't know if you ever heard him say that, Harry, or not, but he would say that, why you come here to practice your legs? And the thing is that his Dharma was good, was darn good. And it was so precious. From the very first retreat I went to, I realized how precious Shifu's, whatever he was saying was. This is the living charm. It's an invitation to practice, to really practice, to study. And this is what's important, is that when we're there, then now we become a practitioner. So it is this that was being forged at that time, being challenged, being talked about. And we did not have a central point, such as in India with the Nalanda University, but we had many points where Chan was discussed and traded. And I imagine back then it would be like trading cards. What have you got? I've got the Diamond Sutra. Well, I have the Prajnaparamita Sutra. Wow, okay. Can I copy yours? Sure. Can you copy mine? Yeah, of course. And it would imagine that. Imagine reading something like that and the Diamond Sutra and going, whoa. The first time that you read the Diamond Sutra, you may not have understood it, but you knew there was something very important there, right? Nobody saying anything? No nods of the head. It is in this way. There's so many people that have read the Diamond Sutra, and you know that there's something there. And it's very, very powerful. I have a student that used to be a pastor, and he was a very serious pastor. He was used to minister in downtown LA at the place with it's always showed up in all these detective movies that has a sign at the top says Jesus saves. That was where he would do that. If you ever seen a gangster movie or something, you'll see that Jesus saves. But he started reading the Diamond Sutra, and I would see the book every time he would come to class, and I'd see it again and again and again. And I'm going, "You haven't finished?" He goes, "No, I'm working my way through it again. No, I'm working my way through it." But it finally worked. It penetrated. I could tell there was some look in his eye, something about him, some, what I'd say, a gnosis. You could see the gnosis in him, this connection. And so the Diamond Sutra is in this way. All of these sutras, they have very incredible power to help you to transcend. It is not in the words, but it is in the heart of them. And again, that was what Shifu was talking about, this part that he was in some ways lamenting, that there was a loss of the focus on the heart and the loss of the focus of how to get to the heart, which was serious study and practice. And in that, then meditation can be of use. But without that, there's not very much, either if you are reading like a scholar or you're sitting in meditation. But the combination of the two can be very, very effective. It is why I'm always talking to you about how to meditate, how to wall gaze, essentially. I love that term, because that's what you're doing, is you're just simply looking at the wall. If the mind conjures up images, they're on the wall. One knows that they're projected on mind. You don't need to know anything more about all the projections that are happening. You just know that they're arising due to causes and conditions. That's all. You don't have to go further than that. That is wall gazing. And with the right view, then you understand that when you're wall gazing, you are reviewing conjured up images in mind, but understand that that which is viewing them is not you. That which you think is you is also projected onto the wall. And that's the difference. That's the difference. This awareness that's there, that's what makes the difference in terms of all of this. And we don't understand that. And so instead we flip the lens back to the self looking at the wall, saying, I am looking at the wall. No, that's not it. That's what finally, in frustration, the Buddha yelled at Ananda, that's not your mind. And when he yelled at him, Ananda was shaken, because he didn't understand what was this. He couldn't think beyond the idea of a life and being. And he was thinking of the idea of a perfected life and being, rather than looking through this idea of a life and being, looking through the dream. And that's the difference. constantly have to look through it, to penetrate through it, to do that. But yet we still have this ability of the Shen, of the heart. This body is still useful. It makes noises that can set people onto the proper path. So there's some value to that. The difficulty is that trying to convince all of you that are listening that you are not listening. It is just mind listening, and you are part of the dream. So I'm not really talking to you. I'm communicating with mind. How do you think I contacted you, Vadim? It's just with mind, with heart. I'm concerned about you. And so I want to know. This is the esoteric side of the practice. It was not by accident that I did that and I sent something to Esther, because I wanted to show you there's this heart of what we're doing. It is how we practice. It is not the individual. We use the individual body. And you know, I'm not like Prince. I don't want to just have a symbol and say, don't call me Gilbert anymore because I'm this symbol. Okay, call me this. No, it isn't in this way. We see directly through. It is there. Every single practice does that, whether it's Theravada or the Mizong, the Tibetan practice. Every practice is in this way to look into mind. Our way is very, very direct. Others, they're building this stairway to heaven. And I've been using this term quite a bit. And I like that analogy of like exactly how many steps is it to heaven? The thing is that where we're building this little scope to look into the world. And we see the world contained in mind. We cannot see the edges of mind. It's infinite. There's no use in trying to go further with that. It is just simply we see that. And that was what was happening at this time period where all of this kind of thinking was coming about and being merged into a concrete system, and a system that was more of demonstration and performance than of saying, you know, this is this. Because even if back then, if somebody said something, you say, oh, he's a Chan master, to go, what do you mean a Chan master? Never mind that. In the future, he'll be known as a Chan master. Right now, he's just a Buddhist, because there wasn't this Chan school or the five houses of Zen. Which house do you belong to? You know, it wasn't a fraternity. You know, it was, or a sorority. It was just different things that were happening and different ways of approaching the same thing. So it's very important. And I wanted to do this because I had read in two different places about this. And I think even Esther had provided me something this week too, food for discussion about Master Shen Yang and his approaches to that, why he set up I would say reinstituted a lineage there and connected it to the lineage from before, because he was transmitted the Dharma. And so it either ended with him or he carried it forward. But he understood the gravity of the situation, that it has to be brought forward, and he has to have people that are going to carry it forward. And he's looking for people that are educated, that are willing to eat bitter, to practice, to study. And it is in this way that we're always studying. And I have to laugh because if you've seen how many books that I was studying this week, no, it was a pile much higher than this of books, and it's just something that is important, but it's no longer a chore. It is just something that one does, and the more that we do that, the more it enables me, one, to convey the faith I have in the practice, and convey where to practice, how to practice, and what is mine. And this is very, very important, because when we look at it, we have to see this in the proper perspective. Without that perspective, we are lost. We think that, again, think about that analogy of building a stairway to heaven, where from the very beginning, from the classics, Chan, you already had it. Not only did you already have that, the mind, but you had Buddha nature. You already had the Tathagata Garbha profound wisdom that was there as well. Very amazing. So I really invite you to practice more and more. Don't get lazy, and don't shy away because I'm doing that. There's no test for you. It is just simply that by the virtue of you listening to me, you have a deep root with me, and a deep root with Shifu, and the masters on down the line. This, I think, you see is in some ways not your ordinary Dharma talks, but an exhortation, as they were doing back in the 8th century and the 7th century, to practice. And that's what's important. And you see all the way through, no matter what you read, it all comes to Chan. So this idea of Chan, the spirit of Chan, is just the responsibility to see that with faith, that there's something incredible here. And I encourage you all to seek it. The more you seek it, the more then you don't even have to worry about seeking it any longer, because it just becomes automatic. So I never resorted to anything that I had prepared to lecture on today, but I hope that this will serve as inspiration to you in terms of how to practice. It was a great lecture I would have given you, but we'll never know, I guess. Okay, thank you very much. I'll take questions. No questions. We always start this way. You guys understand what I was conveying to you? David.
Thank you for the talk, of course, Gilbert. I just have maybe two very quick comments, and one of them you wrote to me yesterday was don't that I have to practice dropping the self. And then the second one was related to when you were talking about instead of mind looking at the wall, it's often David is looking at the wall. And that was a very strong, not only what you said to me yesterday when I asked that question also, which I'm very, very grateful that you did that, but also to what you presented today. And I just, I'm really enthused about it all right now. And I would like to get the eye out of the whole thing, but I just want to thank you for all that. So that's all I wanted to say.
Yeah, I'm appreciative that you understood what I was saying, because it took a bit of contemplation for you to understand. Don't have David gaze at the wall. It has to go beyond David looking at the wall. Mind doesn't need David there to see the wall. And the wall is essentially whatever is projected onto itself. And we've talked about that many times, about these inquiry of matching halves. And it is in just this way that we see things. But if we practice in this way, then it is not just simply that we practice when we're sitting on the cushion. And Shifu had made that comment as well, that it's not just sitting on the cushion, it's what you're doing. Chan is what you're doing, at all times. And that's what's important, is to understand that. Okay. Any other questions? Maybe this wasn't challenging enough material for you today. I'm surprised. If not, I can go back to my regular programming here, since I have time.
Oh, Gilbert,
Yes.
I just thought a comment you might observe. It was something that you said earlier, which made me think of a quote that I came across, which was somewhat apropos to what you're saying, if I can just bring it up on my computer. Oh, here we go. It's from Brother David Stendhal Rast, who was a Christian Catholic monk, and he said the really strange thing about human beings is that we're the only species that has to work to be ourselves.
Yeah, I think that, implicit in that is Chan, and looking at it and saying, then who, if you have to work at it,
Yes.
then it's not really yourself, and it's pretty clear that it isn't. But that is an important milestone, let's say, to kind of dissociate from that stinky guy, and say, that's not me. And but even saying me, like there's another me, a cleaner me, then that's what got Ananda in trouble with the Buddha, because he was still trying to polish up the self. And the big jump in this is to jump from the idea of not a perfect self, like a Confucianist would be looking for, this perfect self, but to see the idea of anatman, which is not self. And I think that distinction is very, very important when we say not no self, but not self, because we don't have to make self disappear. It is an illusion as it is, but it's an illusion appearing in mind. So it has the reality of appearing in mind, but it's only transitory, very temporary. And it's difficult for us to try to approach the self in that way, because then the self comes up and says, oh, that's confusing. Don't even think about that. What are you going to do? Disappear or what? And so, but it is in that self-introspection that there's a self-absorption. And the self literally is absorbed by mind. What then? It just is absorbed. Go ahead, Harry.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it's helpful sometimes, I think, to refer to it as the sense of self, and sense written in like big, 64-point letters and self like 8-point. I mean,
So
it's
you're
really,
saying senses like the sense.
no, sense of self, an
Oh,
idea,
sense of self.
an idea of self is what we don't have a solid self, but we have an idea which is false, but we dance around it.
Yeah, and it's difficult because we set into motion, and this is the errors of somebody practicing Chan without right view, a way of trying to make the bad self disappear. And that is from this version of moving towards this perfection of the person. And that's why I have been lately addressing things from the viewpoint that our practice should be the reflection of the Buddha mind on down. And let me see if I can find, I don't know if I can find something. I sent something to Sentha last night, some passage. Hold on. If I can find it. That was kind of, and it says, it's not going to let me go sideways. Come on. Yeah. All right, I'll do it best I can. And what is meant by the uniformity of, and what is meant by the uniformity of teachings? This refers to teachings regarding the 37 elements of awareness, not factors of enlightenment. 37 elements of awareness attained by myself and other Buddhas. In short, we all speak the Dharma with unobstructed wisdom. This is what is meant by the four uniformities. But here the point is that this was in a sutra, and it was saying it's the practice on down. It is this 37 elements of awareness. So it changes everything to what is the awareness is the mind. That's why I say that if you practice by turning the mind's eye inward, then you're looking at things in the right way. It is the difference. And it hit me so clearly. And I went, I've got to present this to people so people can see. That's why I've been saying, the 37 factors, the Eightfold Path, the six paramitas, all of those things, they're all from the top on down. That's how they got here. But they're all reflected in the conduct of a Buddha. And so it's interesting, but when we try to copy the conduct of the Buddha, that's the stairway to heaven. And we fail, because we go like, how many more steps then? I've been walking for a long time. And the sutras say, if you practice like this, it can take kalpas of time to get there. You only have to see it's just there. So that's kind of where I'm going. And I was so happy to see that last night. I sent it to Sentha just to show her, say, this is what I've been talking about. And here I found it in the sutra. And so it's something that made me feel good because I know I'm not leading you guys astray.
Gilbert, one more thing.
Sure.
Sure. I think what you just said is exactly that line from Faith and Mind. If you're off by a hair, then you turn heaven into hell. That's my translation. That there's the gulf between heaven and hell. Just with the wrong emphasis on mistaking consciousness for mind.
And that's why the Shurangama Sutra painstakingly approached this and to get it right, and why they use Sariputra as the whipping boy on all the wisdom sutras, to try to show, that there's still attachments there. So if you look at it and you look at Sariputra in the Vilamakruti Sutra, where he's, like all the flowers are stuck onto his robe, and that's the whole point, is there's still something sticking. And so if we know that there's something is moving and stuck to you, so if you had flower petals on you, Robert, would you think those to be phenomena or not phenomena? They're not moving. See, very interesting, because that was the subtlety in this one of Sariputra. He couldn't see it. He himself couldn't see why the flowers got stuck onto him. And the others were just kind of like shaking their heads, and going like, he can't get it, and so there he is sitting there like a parade float, with all the flowers stuck to him. But this, again, these are the subtleties. This is a transition to the esoteric, and that's what's very, very important in terms of this, in terms of how you practice. If you can turn that corner little by little, don't expect it to happen all at once, but it can. In a moment, in a snap of fingers, it can happen, but don't keep waiting. Did I hear the snap? It's not probably your old bones creaking. But the thing is that it is something that if you practice sincerely and clearly, it will match. It will match on its own. Naturally, it will match. And so there's nothing you have to do, nothing you have to force, there. But to try to do it and copy and to be a Buddha in that way, oh my God, that would be horrible. You'd be walking around all day going like, I'm enlightened, I'm hungry. No, that's not an enlightening thought. Well, if it is, if my stomach is hungry, well, then how come I'm hungry? And you just break it right there. There's no way you could do that. So hopefully you can see that, just to settle down and practice in the present moment. You don't have to get it 100% right, but at least you know the way, or you know not the way. Okay, any last questions, comments? Thank you, Harry, for filling in here. But
we have
Yes.
one in the chat from
Okay.
Sherlan Liu. Apologies for the pronunciation. Who asks, what's the difference between heart and mind?
So it's Chalan Lu. There isn't really a difference. We can kind of go into it grammatically in terms of when we say heart and mind. That's why sometimes it's collectively referred to as heart mind. And this was, to me, an important way of referring to it, rather than just simply like what is the word for just mind? Harry, do you know?
In the classical text, it's just Shin, that one character.
Yeah, because I remember seeing it, that there's two words for mind. Sometimes they combine them. Anybody
Maybe in contemporary Chinese.
It's 自性. The two words 自性. It's like the self nature.
Oh, and Shin being heart?
Yeah, 性 being the nature.
Sheng.
性, not 心. 心 is the heart. 性 is the
Yeah.
nature. With the add the word in front of it, it's called 自性, means self nature, the Buddha nature.
Okay, and that's kind of where we're going with this. And thank you, Robert, because it's been a long time since I remember those words. But does that help you at all when we refer to things as heart mind? It again is kind of like when we're referring to the matching halves, but here instead of this half being the Dharmakaya, it is the aspect of the dynamic function of mind, which is this Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi produces this compassion. And this compassion is the self-nature of mind. And it's important to make this distinction, so it's not just heart. That's why I always talk about it as heart mind, to distinguish it, to say that it is self-nature, the self-nature of mind, that this heart cannot be separated from mind. It is the self-nature of mind, and that self-nature emanates what's called karuna, Karuna, and that karuna is translated, Sanskrit word, is one who has an interest in the suffering of others. So this is the product of Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi, this profound wisdom. And so this heart mind is what one uses to harmonize with other people. And it's very powerful. It has the power to send messages halfway across the world. It has power to do many things. Shifu used it. And so I hope that you can do this. And if you don't understand it completely, keep asking and probing it, so that you can feel that heart mind. It is something that's there, like a mother to their child, no matter if it was the mother with the most beautiful child on earth, or it was the mother that of a hippopotamus and the baby hippopotamus. And it's still there. But we see everyone like that. We see everyone with this incredible nurturing love. And so it's not that we disregard sentient beings. We still maintain this incredible care about the sentient beings, but we understand they're illusory, but understand they're not different from us, and that suffering that they undergo in the dream, even though it's a dream, need not happen. So if you could understand that this world is a dream, completely a dream, and somehow have the gnosis of experiencing that, you would not generate an interest in nirvana and leaving. You would simply be thinking about how you could convey this to others so that other people could awaken. This is bodhicitta. This is the bodhicitta of a bodhisattva. This is heart mind. Okay, that's about the best way I could explain it. Okay, any other questions about that? Chilanlu? No? It's fine? Oh, okay.
Okay, there we go. Because I have to wait for the host to unmute me. I'm just wondering, because today you mentioned about the Diamond Sutra, and that there's Heart Sutra. But for most of the class that you're talking about is really kind of investigating in mind.
Yes.
And so I just feel like there is a gap between the heart and mind. When you don't investigate with your heart, you connect. With your mind, you investigate. With your heart, you connect. And that's two different things for me. So I'm just wondering, what how do I bring the heart and mind together?
I'm so happy that you asked this question. And there's no low level or high level questions here. There's just questions. So the thing is, your question is a very, very good one. It comes with the idea of being stuck in duality, that you are seeing heart and mind as different. But from everything that I've taught from the beginning of the Chan and the Patriarchs, everything is ekayana. And ekayana is just mind. And this mind, that's why the Heart Sutra was saying, hey, Sariputra, everything is not real. You're approaching the examination from the idea that something is real. But when we look at it and we see that everything is just mind, and now we bring in the Yogacara school into the Heart Sutra, and everything is empty. Now the Madhyamika school comes in as well. And they are looking at it and saying, these things are not dual. There's no real and unreal to it. It is just mind. And that's why I say heart mind, because that is the message of the Heart Sutra, was that when the great Bodhisattva of Avalokiteshvara was coursing through the deep prajna paramita, this coursing happens at all times. And it is something that we see is the Buddha mind. So as the Avalokiteshvara is processing all of this information, he perceived that all five skandha were empty. This perception is not the perception of a sentient being. It is the perception of a Buddha. That's the difference. People miss that in the Heart Sutra, that perception was the perception of a Buddha. Avalokiteshvara was a high Buddha, that high Bodhisattva, Bodhisattva, that could have become a Buddha any time, but for the vow to deliver all sentient beings. He is using the Buddha perception to see the world. This Buddha perception does not have a duality of heart and mind. It is showing in this particular sutra, the Heart Sutra, that the product of Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi, this unexcelled wisdom, this profoundest wisdom, the highest wisdom, the product is compassion, the heart. Why do we know that? Because this is a wisdom sutra. And this sutra, what is Avalokiteshvara known for? For karuna, for compassion. It's why it wasn't Manjushri was coursing through the deep prajna paramita and perceived, it was Avalokiteshvara. It was there specifically to show the combination of heart and mind. That this is not two things, not something looking and seeing, no subject object, it is just is, and it perceives everything in the Dharmakaya, which includes all of us, as mind, and seeing things in this way, and it's natural caring for it. If you had cut your finger, you would want to take care of it. You'd want to clean it and put a bandage on it and take it off the next day and put another one till it's healed. That's natural. The Buddha body, the Dharmakaya, has that same function of wanting to take care of this, even though it's simply a manifestation of a dream. We believe we're here. We believe we're born. We believe that we die. So it is the awakening from the dream that when one is awakened, one looks around and says, wow, this is a pretty clever dream. It sounds solid. It sounds very solid, but nevertheless, it's still a dream. And we cannot step out of the dream to prove it, but mind can. Mind can move back and see everything projected on the wall of the mind. And when that happens, that is a realization. That can and will happen with serious practice. Guarantee it. Okay, guarantee it. And that's Gilbert's guarantee. Remember, it's a lifetime guarantee. If you don't get it this lifetime, you're guaranteed to come back next lifetime. Okay, and try again. I can't guarantee you'll come back as a human, but more than likely you'll at least have 4 limbs of some kind. Like Master Ling Chi said, we don't know whether we'll come back in the belly of a donkey or a cow. So it's better to practice now. Okay. Thank you for your question. Your question was a very good one. It was out, it filled in right after what Harry was talking about. So that's good. And then Wendy, you had a question.
Thank you. Just to confirm my understanding that self-nature is that Chinese, if somebody can answer that. And also the improvement, I always thought it's a self-improvement thing. So that's the stairways to heaven.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like, I'm not saying that you shouldn't do that. So don't go around, I'm not saying you, but don't go around saying Gilbert says it's no use to practice, you know, because it doesn't work that way. There was actually somebody a long time ago, maybe 20 years ago or 30 years ago in Taiwan that was going around, and he was claiming himself to be a master and said he could do anything because it didn't matter because it's all a dream, but to his practitioners that they all had to maintain the precepts. But I think that was just his way of living a very lascivious life. But in any case, it's not in that way. We when it's done in the right way, all we have is this incredible compassion towards people. We can have it towards individuals, or we can have it towards others. And we maintain, if we practice in the proper way, we'll maintain the precepts automatically. Okay, and there are guides there just in case we're off. We know that those guides are there, but we don't necessarily have to heed to those guidelines because the mind will naturally keep us in check by itself. But I'm not saying, yeah, you know, the Eightfold Path and the 37 factors and stuff, you shouldn't do it, but you should understand that these are reflections of the Buddha mind. And so that's important, okay? Rather than trying to make yourself ready for going up to meet the Buddha, okay? I don't think that will happen. No, where you're going to go up and sit next to the Buddha or whatever. No, it might, but it would only be a dream in any case. Okay, did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
No problem. Okay, you're getting it little by little. You're getting it, Wendy. So it comes in times. All right, I'm gonna let you guys go. It's late over there in the East Coast, and you know, dinner awaits me of some form or another. You know, whatever I can defrost in 2 minutes or so, depending on how powerful my microwave is. But I'll see. But anyway, I will see you next week, and we'll continue on with this, and we'll see if we get back on track with it. But I appreciated being able to present this today because of the fact that it's something that was on my mind the entire week, and I did quite a bit of studying for 3 different events, and it came all together in terms of wanting to share this with you. So peace to you. Be careful, Vadim.
Thank you,
My
Gilbert.
blessings to you and
Thank
to
you.
all there. Take care.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Gilbert.
You're welcome.
Gilbert.
Wendy.
Thank you, bye.
Thank you, Gilbert.
Thank you, Gilbert.
Take care.
Gilbert.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Have a good supper.
Thank you, Gilbert.
Yeah. See you later. Bye-bye. Sue, what's for dinner? Okay, see you later. Take care. Thank you, Ian.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Ian.
Goodbye, Esther.
Bye, Ian. Bye, Sue.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Have a good time in West Virginia.